So I decided to do a bit of USB testing. I've set up a bit of just cut an old lead, soldered to a bit of breadboard, so I'll make it a bit easier. I've double spaced them. That's just so if I'm a bit sloppy with the probe, I don't end up in between two short amount, that kind of stuff. Although a bit of cross voltage on those actually doesn't matter, because you'll see soon there's a bit of voltage on both. That's the way they work. They put resistors in between. So what happens is chargers aren't chargers. So you know, all sorts of different chargers, all sorts of colours, shapes, you name it. Have a look at the outputs on this one. Big thing is, like originally USB charging, you just had your 5 volts on your positive, your red, and then your negative. Pretty straightforward. And then once people like Apple wanted to start pulling more amps than what you'd put out a normal USB port, they started doing different things like essentially putting resistors across the data pins to put a bit of voltage on them. And then the device charging will look for those voltages. If it sees those voltages, then it goes, all right, I'm going to, I know I can pull some more amps because those voltages are across there, and that's just a bit of a way of it communicating with the charger to, the charger's letting it know that, hey, you can pull more amps. So we'll try a few chargers out. This is an old HTC charger. It's only rated at 1 amp, so that's 5 watts. This is a very old charger from back in the day when phones didn't pull much and fast charge wasn't existing, all the rest. So I'll plug this one in, we'll see what it comes up at. So it'd be handy if I turn it on too. So 5.2 volts on our white, which is data minus. Pretty much nothing interesting, maybe a little bit of leakage, or it could be my meter, and nothing on there. Not surprising. It's old. I think it might have even been pre-Apple putting voltages on other pins and other people following suit. So yeah, straightforward basic charger. Next one, this is a ASUS one for a tablet. It's got a bit more, I think, 5 volts, 2 amps. So 2 amps is 10 watts at 5 volts. Let's see how it goes. Interesting to see if it has any more power on the other pins or not. So 5.25 volts, so that's clearly got 5 volts across it. Data pin's got nothing. The other data pin's got nothing. So even though it puts out 2 amps, it's not doing the doesn't add the extra signal pin. So this would actually be not really great for charging a iPhone, because the iPhone will just trickle charge because it thinks it doesn't have much power. Although it's got a 2 amp capacity. This one's going to be a bit more interesting. This charges for my Galaxy Tab. Now, Galaxy Tab doesn't like charging on many things. So I'm expecting to see something different on these pins. It doesn't like charging on any typical USB charger. It really only likes this charger. So yeah, interesting to see what happens. Which is actually quite annoying once they lock it down to that kind of thing. It only charges on one charger. You can't just plug it into any other USB port. 5.02. That's quite accurate to 5 volts. 1.25 volts. That's interesting. So it's not either the 2 volts or the 2.8 volts that Apple use. And 1.257. So yeah. So 1.25 volts is what they tend to put on there. that makes sense. So obviously the tablet's looking for the 1.25 volts on there, and then it'll actually pull some decent amps. Not sure if I check this one. This is a 2 amp charger, so yeah, pretty straightforward. So theoretically, if I wanted to charge it with something else, I could always either have a little adapter and throw a couple of resistors in line to use it on a normal 2 amp charger, although that'd be a very minor resistor. Alright, so a little bit different. Fast charge. This is an LG, genuine LG. It's from my LG G5. So, interesting thing about this thing, it says output 9 volts at 1.8 amps or 5 volts at 1.8 amps. Now, it's fast charge. I'm assuming fast charges at 9 volts. I've not really looked into fast charge yet, other than I know it's pretty handy. It works quite well. Made in China, like all these things are. So, this one's a bit sideways. We'll see what this has across it. 4.99, 5.0, very accurate. The data pins, pretty much nothing. There's something there though, 0.14. There's definitely something going on there. So it is only 5 volts right now. That 0.14 voltage on those data pins, I'd say this would be doing some kind of communication with the device. So maybe the phone looks for that, sends a signal, something like that. It is a data pin after all, so there's different things I can do with it. But as it is just essentially open circuit voltage, it's only putting out 5 volts. It'll probably wait for that communication before it ups it to 9 volts. This one should be pretty basic. I'm only expecting just positive and negative on this. This is actually for a unit and scanner. 1000 milliamps, so that's 5 watts again. Just charges some basic rechargeable batteries in a radio scanner. So see what this one does. 5.2, so we've got plenty of voltage there. And interesting, 2.8, so if this one's 2, yep, that's 2 volts right there. That's just like the Apple standard. I can't see a scanner needing Apple standard at all. But maybe it's either doing that, it's looking at that so it doesn't pull more power if it's something else, or maybe because it's just a generic Chinese charger and they do on the Apple standard, and based on price, that's what they bought. Who knows? Now this is Big Bertha. I only picked this up recently because it saves me having a power board with a whole chunk of USB chargers in it, which is what ends up happening. This one here supplies, where is it? Supplies quite a fair bit. So 6,800 milliamps, if you can see that there. As you can see, all those ports, it needs to. So 6,800 milliamps is 34 watts. So significantly more power than your 1000 milliwatt or 5 watt chargers. And it's got a variety of different, so it's got both 2.4 and 1 amp chargers. It says tablet and mobile, but at the end of the day, is anyone even going to look at that? They're just going to jam your USB plug straight into the hole, aren't they? Let's see what it does. And dropping things here. Alright, let's go with the 1 amp to start with. I'm going to flip that upside down because otherwise it's going to move. So let's go with the 1 amp. So 1 amp is 5.15 volts. 2.7, so that's interesting. That's close to 2.76, close to the Apple 2.8. And 2.76. That's on both. So the 1 amp has 2.8 on both. Let's see what the 2.4 amp says. So 5.15 volts as well. So that's 2.7 amps and 2.7 amps. 2.7 volts. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. And 2.7 volts, 2.77, 2.8. So that's interesting. So both the 1 amp and the 2.4 amp both have 2.7, 2.8 volts on those data pins. Does that mean is there anything smarter in here, or is it just literally throwing that voltage out and it really doesn't matter which one you plug it into? I'm guessing it doesn't matter which one you plug it into. They just do that for marketing purposes. Make people happy. If someone goes, oh, I've only got a 1 amp charger, and for some reason don't want to charge it until plug it into a 1 amp device, plug it into a 2.4 amp device. Yeah, maybe just make people sleep easier, I don't know. Next up, let's try something different. Alright, so this is a Zito Power Exchange. This is an older battery. It's been used a lot. Been used in the construction of my tiny home, all the rest, so it's had a good beating. This is quite new. As you can tell, for some reason Zito moved from the dark red to the lighter red recently. But anyway, USB charger. So this has 5 volts 1 amps and 5 volts 2.1 amps on its output. So let's see what it does. Just turn it on and let's go with the 1 amp to start with. And then we have 5.2 volts, so plenty on there. 2.78, so that's your 2.8 Apple style. And 2 volts, so very typically Apple style on your 1 amp. So the 2.1 amp, let's see what that does. 5.2 volts, 2 volts, 2.8. That's interesting. Which way around was that? .8, 2 volts. So they're switched. Maybe there's something there with that. I need to look into that further. Maybe the 2.8 and the 2 volts around the other way changes it. That's interesting. I'll have to look into that further because, yeah. I didn't actually notice that on the others. Maybe going back reviewing the video I might notice on the others. Yeah, this is an interesting product. Got some tape over the blue LEDs because they're just so damn bright and they're annoying. This you can just throw any old 18650s in. These aren't actually quite 18650s. These are I think 12650s or something like that. A little bit smaller. They came out of an old laptop battery. They do the trick. Same voltage. Yeah, I'd have space for 2 more, but I don't have 2 more of this particular capacity. The other ones I have are larger. That's a handy little device. You can select from, well, for a start, you've got an output there, 2 USBs, and then it's charging light there. So you've got 12 volts, 9 volts, 6 volts, 5 volts, and 3.7 volts out. A little selector on the side there. Quite handy. Plus, you just got 2 USB chargers as well. Interesting there, as you can see. It shows a little Android symbol, a little Apple symbol. So, I'm assuming this will either have nothing on the data pins and then your Apple voltages on there, or maybe something different on the Android. We're just about to find out. So let's go with the Android connector to start with. Press the power button, turn it on. 5.1, plenty of voltage, nothing, and nothing. So, as I thought, nothing on the data pins. Now this one, having Apple on it, I expect you to have the 2 volts and 2.8 volts. 5.1 volts, 2 volts, 2.75, there's our 2.8 volts. predictable, really. Yeah, so if you got one of these, make a big difference if you had an Apple to plug it in there, but you can plug an Android in there in that one as well. It's not going to make a difference. Plenty of people charge the chargers the wrong things. And this little PowerTech Plus, 2100 milliamps. So 2100 milliamps is about 10.5 watts at 5 volts. This is actually I'll just grab it over here. This little 18650 charger I have here from Jaycar, PowerTech Plus, does the trick. And multimeter saying I've been on for too long. So it does the trick. So why not? It's got USB out on it. Let's give it a bash. This one I'll have to throw it this way. So 5.1 volts, 2 volts, interesting, and 2.8 volts. So it's Apple standard. Now, once again, I don't know whether, because that's what the charger does, so it knows to do it, or if that's just the way the generic chargers are coming out of China. There's probably chips galore, basic same circuit, and they're pumping it out of China, I guess. At that. Slightly bit of a different battery bank here. This is also PowerTech. This is a charger, but this charger also can double as a output. So you put your 18650 battery in there, and it'll output 12 volts, 5 volts DC. So it's a nice little indicator as well. It's telling me it's at 75% at the moment. So let's plug it in. It's quite tight. Hasn't been used much. That'll be why. And see what it's got on it. 5.15 volts, so plenty of volts. Nothing and nothing. So that's pretty much like Android style. So there's no extra voltage for the Apples on this thing. I'm only using this for charging anyway, so not a big deal. Plus, I don't have any Apple devices anymore. So, yeah. This is something I'd want to do a tear down later on. It's interesting. I want to play with it a bit first. Wi-Fi switch, so it hooks to your Wi-Fi network. It's only $20. There's an app for it. And what's interesting, unlike the other Wi-Fi switches I've seen, it has a USB output as well. Now I'm guessing that's probably pretty straightforward to do, although they want to upgrade their circuit a bit, because they're probably already running 5 volts for the wireless here in the processor. So essentially they're probably just bumping up the capacity a little bit and outputting 5 volts for USB. Why not? It's another feature that I haven't seen any others have. 5 volts at 1500 milliamps, so that's 7.5 watts. So that's decent chunk of power, really, for a multi thing. Be interesting to see how much they're jamming circuitry in there with a Wi-Fi in it and everything. I'm kind of expecting this one to be Apple style, just because it's a very universal product. Also, the instructions are, I'm having trouble lining this up. The instructions are for both Apple and, you're kidding me, both Apple and Android, so you're thinking they're going to support both devices. Their USB output would suit both types as well. 5.1 volts, 2 volts, 2.6 volts. That's a little bit low for the 2.7, 2.8 for Apple. I'm not sure what the exact spec is actually, it's just based on things I've measured. So that's a little low for that, but it'll probably work anyway. I don't know how close and how sensitive it is. Here's one here. 2 outputs. I believe when I bought it, it does, well, there you go. Output 5 volts at 1000 milliamps, 5 volts at 2000 milliamps. So it either puts out 5 watts or 10 watts. Doesn't say on there what they are, so we just got out 1 and out 2. This is in my everyday carry. Keep it in my backpack just because it's simple, it's easy, it's light enough, and one feature I like about it, double quickly, and it's got a fairly reasonable, pretty bright light on it. Pretty handy for if you need a torch or something. It just saves me carrying around so much stuff. If this has got a little light in it as well, if I need a torch for something, I just use a battery pack. And I reckon that one LED running off this will run a week. So yeah, let's give this one a try. 5.2 volts, 2.8, and 0. Interesting. Oh no, I think I know why. Yep. Let's try that again. These shut off when they don't sense any load, and because I'm not putting any load on it. So that's 2 volts and 2.8. So that's pretty Apple 1000 milliamp style. Now if we go, we'll wake it up again. 5 volts, 2.8. That's interesting. So that's doing the same thing. So that's 2.1 there. And that one's 2.1. So the only thing I can think of is the difference between 1000 milliamps and 2000 milliamps. Is they switch the 2.8 and the 5 volts around. That makes sense. But that kind of means that a lot of those other ones I tested, I wasn't sure whether they're the same. I might have to go back and test. Interesting theory. I had a quick look online and there isn't great information about it. The 2.8 volts and 2 volts on the data pins is known, but it's interesting to switch around on these for between the 2 amps and the 1 amp. It makes sense. Easy to do. Yeah, so I think that's all I've got to test here. It is, so I'm going to have to look at that further. What I'd like to do too, I'm waiting for a dummy load to arrive, but I've got quite a good amp meter that's going to go with these, so I'd like to actually test how much power these are actually doing. Actually, I've got one more. But as I was saying, I've got 2 more. So I'd like to test how much power these are actually running at to see whether these outputs do output different amounts. How much voltage drop? That's what really interests me too. Is there going to be much voltage drop on some of these chargers, especially the cheap ones? Alright, so I've got this little battery here. It's down to about 12.2 volts, so it's nearly flat. I want to try out one of these car style ones, see how good they are. So I'll plug it in the 1 amp for a start. .1 volts, so that's decent. Nothing and nothing. So that won't pull a lot. So let's try the 2.1 amps. So 2.1 amps is, as I said before, 10.5 watts. So 5 volts, 2 volts, 2.73, so 2.8. It's very much similar. So that 2.1 amp one will work for Apple, stuff like that. I'm guessing that Android are looking for those same, the various Androids, so Samsung, LG, whoever, are probably looking for those voltages too. It makes sense because I've always, once I ditched Apple and moved to Android, my Android devices charge just as fast on the Apple chargers. So I'm sure they're smart enough to look at those too. So yeah, I want to do some more testing, get a bit more thorough. Do some decent amperage testing and see how much the voltage is sagging, because obviously as soon as the voltage starts sagging, well, you're not really outputting what you should be putting out. So if you're getting good amps but the voltage is sagging, also voltage sagging probably shows that the circuit inside is really running towards its maximum if it's sagging. So yeah, time will tell. Hopefully soon, once the amp meter arrives, I'll be able to test that. So, yeah, I'll do another video on that when it arrives.